And now I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar, Power BI Part 1, Introduction to the World of Data Visualization. I'm going to hand things over to our featured presenter today. He is one of our very own New Horizons instructors, Eric Satterfield. Eric, you now have the floor.
All right, thank you very much, Mayanne. Well, of course, as Mayanne said, welcome to Power BI Part 1, Introduction to the World of Data Visualization. I'm very excited about this. I am very passionate about Power BI as a platform, as a tool. I've witnessed how helpful it is for students I've trained. I've also seen how it has greatly benefited me and my own franchise within the context of New Horizons. And I hope to kind of show you some of the awesome things that Power BI has to offer today. Now, first, I do, of course, want to quickly kind of introduce who I am as a trainer and instructor within the New Horizons Network. Of course, my name is Eric. I'm a Microsoft Office Master Certified Instructor associated with the Atlanta, Georgia office of New Horizons Central. I also have my Microsoft Certified Solutions Associate certification in Business Intelligence Reporting, and of course that kind of maps on to Excel, Power BI, and some of Microsoft's Power tools that exist within that sphere. One little fun fact about me before we kind of talk about the agenda for topics I'm going to be exploring in this session. You'll find I'm kind of weird. You'll quickly learn that about me. I really like modern technology. As I've said, I'm passionate about Power BI. I love Microsoft's platforms. You'll kind of hear me. I'll be kind of like a kid in a candy store, I'm sure, with some of these features in this session. But one of the other things that also I do have a profound appreciation for is the past. I have a profound appreciation for old technology, for tools that have really served the world well through time. And one of those manifestations of that is my wife and I collect, clean, and use manual and electric typewriters. My wife actually just did a recent tally because we're in the process actually of moving to Omaha, Nebraska. So moving from Georgia to Omaha, and she found that we have 32 typewriters, which is kind of fun for us. Some of those actually came from like our grandparents. So like my wife has her grandmother's typewriter from, I think it was back in the 1930s when her grandmother was going to business school, and she has a typewriter that she was using way back then. I have one of my grandfather's typewriters that is very close to my heart, and also we have some really old typewriters, and one of them is from the 1920s. I've nicknamed it the Great Gatsby typewriter. It's a cute little typewriter, very, very small, but it's a foldable typewriter, which is kind of cool. So you can actually flip it and lock it into place and then fold it up and put it into a nice little suitcase type container and carry it around with you wherever you want to go. So you'll find again that I have a lot of appreciation for a variety of technology, and also I have a profound appreciation for the past, and that kind of gives you some perspective, just kind of who I am as a person. Now we're going to move, of course, into just talking now, big picture, where are we headed for this session? So my goal is to first help us over the course of this webinar define data visualization and have an understanding of what that is as a concept. Then I'm going to survey the traditional visualization process, talk about the experience that I'm sure most, if not all of us, have walked through in some way and are still probably having to battle day in and day out. Then I'm going to turn to show you what that could look like with the power of Microsoft Power BI. I will give a flyover of the Power BI ecosystem to have us really get an understanding of what Power BI can do, what are the pieces of the puzzle, and then I'm going to spend the rest of our session for the remaining time before we get to Q&A working through a demonstration where I'm going to show you in real time how quick and easy it is to connect the data, work with that data and have that data talk to other sets of information, and then create visuals built on top of it. Now, with all that in place, let me go ahead and actually launch in. So to start, I want to define what exactly is data visualization. So when it comes to data visualization, in a very basic description, data visualization is the process of creating charts and graphs to visually represent data. So it is the process of taking information and really and truly drawing out of that something that we can use. Data visualization is a key part of the data analysis process, and obviously data visualization is one of one of the main features that goes into what is called data mining, because data mining involves finding insights within data and extracting that, so we have these nuggets of gold, these nuggets of business insight that we can then use to make decisions. Now, data visualization, of course, is very significant, and a key part of that is the visual piece. Visuals are the key to transform that information I've been talking about into actionable insight. Now, as it relates to the context in which we are, of course, working within the realm of either Excel or in something like Power BI, we may often have data sets that look something like this, right? This is the equivalent of an Excel pivot table. It's called a matrix in Power BI, but pivot tables look a lot like this. That's a lot of information. It's good information, and obviously, I mean, I'm an Excel trainer. I teach people how to make pivot tables too, and pivot tables are amazing. I love them. They're my favorite topic from a Part 2 class. But if I have the choice between looking at this and looking at the same data represented like that, I think we all probably know pretty clearly which one we want to go with, right? There's nothing wrong with looking at the data itself in some sort of a summarized or a clear format, but the insights that we can gather from a visual that is color-coded, that is arranged in clear and logical ways, that shows trends over time, and even helps us have a visual understanding of spikes, that gives us insights that we would not easily be able to gather from the information that's available to us. Now, when it comes to this data visualization process, now that we've done a high-level look at what visualization is, we want to then take a look at, okay, now what is the traditional way that people get to that? What is the traditional way that people get to insight? Now, this is, of course, basically a perpetual reinvention of the wheel. I'm sure that some of you know about the power of pivot tables with the ability to refresh and pull things in with new data sets that have come in. But within the context of a standard Excel workbook or other reporting platform, often it looks something like this. We start by having to extract our data. Now, when it comes to pulling data from a data source, you probably have a variety of data sources. I'm sure that each of you who's in attendance today in this webinar maybe has some Excel files you pull, or CSVs, or even Shutter having to pull data out of PDFs. And more than likely that involves this. Type, 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 and you're just typing in lines and lines of data. Maybe some of us have the luxury of connecting to cloud services such as an Azure database or Salesforce, or even a platform like SurveyMonkey for survey data that we collect and then present within the context of a report. But we also probably, some of us, even have to deal with on-premises data stored in a SQL database because of HIPAA compliance or GDPR or some other compliance or regulatory reason we cannot pull outside of our environment. Well, often this involves us going to each and every one of these separate tools and manually pulling data or running SQL queries or fill in the blank. Once we get the data, that's already hurdle one. Once we get the data, then of course the next piece is combining that data into a usable data set. So we have an Excel workbook, and we've got to actually take all this information and make it work in a format that can actually be visualized. So we're not even dealing with the visualization piece. We're having to do all the hard work that gets us to the point of visualization. Now, if we only have one file, this is pretty straightforward. I mean, you might do a lot of calculations and VLOOKUPs and such to interact with the data, but you still may find it's pretty straightforward. If you have to do like a lot of people, where you're working not with one, but 5, 10, 15 files, good luck, right? I mean, I've had some students where it takes them days to get together a report for a quarterly process. And then the next quarter, they've got to do it all over again. Once we finally get the data in place, then we get to the point where we can start making visualizations, where we can start basically representing data in a clear way. But even at this point, when we're finally getting ready to select content, we still have to decide what is the best visual. And of course, some of us will probably have an arsenal of visuals we like to use. You know, scatter chart, a tree map, a line chart, a bar chart, and we know what they are. But sometimes we have to make decisions with new kinds of visuals because it may not always be clear which is the best, which fits our data. And as such, we often have to kind of cycle through different options until we finally settle on the perfect visual that gets the job done. But the visualization process still isn't completed because after we select the visual, often we then have to do work on configuring the data. And I'm sure that if you've only ever used manual charts in Excel, you dread this part, right? I mean, I do, and I'm a trainer, right? I mean, I've had some exposure to the steps that go into that, and it still can be challenging to convert what I want into something that I can actually present. So then we've got to restructure the data, put the columns and rows into place, and configure these in a way that fits our needs. Then after that, we get to the point of actually distributing the report, either presenting it in a PowerPoint deck, delivering it live in a meeting, or, as I'm sure many of you have to do, sending an email with this file and have that sent out as an attachment. Well, the problem with this, of course, is, number one, what happens if I send it and then somebody else didn't get it? Oh, great, now I've got to send it out to that person. And then 5 more people need to be in attendance for the meeting. Maybe I also have another problem. What if the data change between when I sent them my file and when the meeting happens? And there are critical changes I need to update. All right, now I've got to attach another file, and now we have a new copy, and it's floating around in everybody's inboxes. The last part then, of course, after we finally do all of this and everybody consumes the report, is lather, rinse, repeat. The next time we do it, the next quarter, the next month, the next year. It's just a continuous cycle of constantly battling data, working with data, configuring it just so we can make the nice, pretty visuals. Now, of course, Excel has some great automation techniques. There's some great tools that can help us do more with that. I mean, I teach those classes, New Horizons. We offer those, talk about all the cool things that Excel has. But what if I told you there's a better way? What if I told you there's a way that you could actually take these steps, do them only one time, only once, and then every future update, every time new data comes in, you need to make changes to your process. Instead of all those steps happening every single quarter or month, the process could look like this, where when new data comes in, you pull it out, you maybe change a few visuals and you update some of the data, and then you publish a report. Or in even a better scenario, what if your data process looked like this, where all you would have to do is simply pull new data when the data comes in, drop it into a folder, and then hands off. Or even possibly this, where literally you don't do anything. You simply sit back, relax, take a nap. And I'm obviously being a little silly here, but this is possible. I've seen it. I actually have implemented this in my own company, and it is fantastic. This capability, this power is, of course, all thanks to the magic of Microsoft Power BI. Now, Power BI enables us to invent the wheel only once by doing our data analysis processes, doing our trims, our VLOOKUPs, our ifs, all of these different steps we might need to do to get the data right, and then allow us to then automate on top of that process, have our visuals instantly update to reflect that new data. Now, this, of course, is the part 1 webinar. So I'm going to focus primarily on making the report look pretty, making the visuals that are built on top of the data, getting to it and using it. If you end up joining us for the part 2 webinar, I'll even show you some of the behind the scenes work you can do if your data isn't just right. Now, in order for us to understand Power BI with the demonstration I'm going to be exploring in just a few minutes, it is a good idea for me to explain what exactly makes up the Power BI ecosystem. Power BI is not just one thing. It is a variety of tools that come together to create a single experience that either you as a report designer can offer the people who consume your report, or as if maybe you're here on this call looking at a Power BI or I should say a reporting solution for your organization, how you as an organization can embrace these tools and have a consistent reporting experience all across your environment. That starts with Power BI Desktop. Now, Power BI Desktop is a really amazing tool that can help us author incredible reports. I'm going to be using that in my demo. That's going to be what I focus on for this session today. We use this to create these reports and connect to data and repeat all the changes we want to make on that data again and again and again. Now, I'm sure that some of you probably know macros in Excel, potentially. Maybe you do a lot with Excel macros, a lot with VBA. Power BI offers the same kind of concept as a macro, which is automated steps, but the beauty is you don't ever have to trigger the macro. It can automatically be refreshed. You simply click refresh, data updates, and all those steps are accomplished. Now, after you use Power BI Desktop to create your report, to craft the experience you're going to hand off to an executive or a customer or a coworker, then you publish that data to what is called the Power BI service. Now, Power BI service, what I refer to affectionately as Power BI Online, is the platform that allows us to handle the sharing piece. Now, the Power BI service is, of course, part of the paid licensing with Microsoft. So if I want to actually share live reports that other people can actively consume, we do have to have licenses, and I'll probably talk about that a little bit later on. For now, what I want you to see is that the Power BI service, this online experience, is where you go to share those reports with others, and it's also where you can actually automate the updates on your data. For example, in my company, we use SharePoint lists as part of a process I implemented to track what our instructors are working on. As a training company, it's critical for us to know where our instructors are working, what can they teach, so that if a class opportunity comes up for something like Microsoft Power BI, for example, then they know Eric Satterfield can teach this. Jeff Tatusco can teach that. We have it set up so that we have our lists where people are updating the data, and then the Power BI service 8 times a day reaches into those lists and pulls new information automatically. I don't have to do anything. There's no clicking. I literally have let this run for months, and I've never even looked at it behind the scenes because it just does it. It's beautiful. And that's the power of the service. So the desktop and the service, it's the desktop makes the reports, the service lets you consume and present those reports. Now, there's a third piece to the Power BI ecosystem as well, Power BI Mobile. Now, Power BI Mobile is just that. It's a mobile app that lets you consume Power BI reports. And the awesome thing, even with Power BI, just right out of the box, is you don't have to create special reports to give to others. Literally, all a person has to have phone. They have to pick up one of these, be able to then access Power BI, and they have access to any reports that you've shared with them. And they see any updates that are made to that report thanks to the service automatically on that device. Now, Power BI does have a really amazing editing or authoring experience, even from a mobile device or mobile report perspective, but you get the idea, right? It's quick and it's easy and it's designed to be intuitive and to really fit our scenarios well. Now, these are the 3 main parts of the Power BI ecosystem. And these are really, really powerful functionalities, and it's a beautiful kind of a feedback loop process where we can have this kind of workflow from start to finish of making the reports, sharing the reports, consuming the reports, and then receiving feedback from the people who are viewing them to help us make our reports even better. But there is a 4th part to this ecosystem, not what everybody necessarily needs to use, but in case you're here and you're part of an org that has compliance requirements, there is even a report server that acts as an on-premises solution. So you actually have the capacity to keep all of your data, all of your reporting in-house, only accessible either within your network or presumably, obviously, if you have VPNs configured with a VPN secured tunnel into your firewall, and then be able to consume and view those reports there as well. This, of course, is also very similar to SQL Server Reporting Services, or SSRS, for anybody on this webinar who maybe has exposure to using SSRS as a tool. You can even migrate your SSRS reports that already exist into the Power BI report server. And this gives you an incredible reporting experience that allows you to offer cloud-based solutions as well as on-prem solutions, and have these even work in tandem in a hybrid type mode experience. Now, we've so far looked at what makes up this Power BI experience, and we've seen all the pieces of this Power BI puzzle. But I obviously don't want to just talk at you for the session. I don't think that would really show what Power BI can do. So for the remaining time, I am now going to spend our time focusing on a demonstration. And I'm going to use Power BI Desktop to create a Power BI report. I'm going to show you some of the cool things, kind of a spoiler for some of the awesome stuff we normally explore in the context of a class, but look at some of the cool things that the desktop environment allows us to do, and show you how we can really and truly kind of accomplish amazing reports in very, very little time. So with that, I'm going to end my slideshow. I'm going to bring up Power BI Desktop. So here we are in the Power BI Desktop. You'll find that this actually looks very, very familiar if you've used pivot tables ever in Excel. Just like Microsoft Office's platform, you do have a ribbon with some standard ribbon controls. You, of course, have panes here that are familiar from a pivot table perspective, some new, but some standard type panes you can engage with. And you'll see that we also have this canvas. Now, the beautiful thing about Power BI is it's kind of a conglomeration of tools. It's like Excel meets Access meets PowerPoint. So it's kind of a combination of these different tools with some other extra stuff thrown in. There's even some OneNote type functionality, at least that I know of from a OneNote experience as a OneNote trainer. Now, when it comes to Power BI, we're looking right now at the canvas. This canvas is basically where we experience the PowerPoint for data. That's what Microsoft kind of describes Power BI is, and this is where that kind of plays out. This is where we create the experience that we're going to deliver. Kind of like a slide deck, the thing that we want to present to other people. Now, in the context of this environment, I am going to start by getting data from a folder containing a bunch of files. Now, I bet if I did a check with everybody in attendance today, probably many of you get monthly extracts with CSVs. Some of you maybe have folders like this. I'll bring up the sample data real quick that I'm going to be pulling from for this session. Here I have a folder containing 22 CSV files, and each of these was a month and a year extract. And you get this maybe emailed to you, or dropped into a network drive folder, or you pull it manually from a system. Now, normally this would involve a lot of copying and pasting, and this is kind of like where we all go, ugh, right? Because normally if this were a new process I had to create, I would have to open this up and do a lot of extra steps. Or if I knew maybe macros or VBA, I could create an automated process to fetch this data. Now, some of you, I bet, have worked with Power Query inside of Excel or one of the other Power tools. If you have, you're in for a treat because you already know how to do the basics of Power BI. You see, in Power BI, we do a step called Get Data. When I click Get Data, this opens a whole new world of different types of data sources that I can connect with. Now, we're currently at the start of that BI process. I kind of laid it out there with the traditional data visualization piece, connecting to the data. That's critical. We have to get the data first. No visuals without data, right? Well, when I click Get Data, it opens up a huge list of what Microsoft can connect to. And the beauty of this is these connections can be live connections. When I refresh the data, it automatically grabs it and pulls it into my report. So if I have an Excel workbook connection, I link into an Excel file, and if somebody changes it, I could click refresh, pull all the data from Excel. Maybe for some of us, we connect to PDFs. That's one of the newer capabilities in Power BI within, I think, the last year. That is an awesome feature. I'm actually using that for books that we use at New Horizons. I've started doing this for a process I implement, and I can literally reach into a book with a table of contents and extract that table of contents, or if you use data in a PDF and it's protected so you can't access the data itself, Power BI does the trick. It just reaches in, grabs columns, grabs rows, and pulls it live into your Power BI report. Then you also have things like SharePoint for cloud storage capabilities. You have Access databases. You'll see you have SQL and IBM DB2 databases. You'll see there are categories on the left. So I could explore the Microsoft Power Platform and actually use data from other Power BI reports in this report as well. There's an Azure connection. So I have a lot of Azure interactions that are available to me for that cloud-based scenario. I can even go to online services and do some really cool stuff, such as pull in right from a SharePoint list, which is what I use for our process. I use SharePoint as our functional database, and all of our data is stored in SharePoint, and I just pull it together, link the data up, and have a beautifully functioning report. I can, of course, connect to Dynamics 365, even connect directly to Salesforce, Google Analytics. I mean, you'll see a lot of names you probably recognize. Smartsheet, I know, is a big one for some of my students in some classes. We connect to Zendesk, and the list goes on and on. I can even go to this other category, because if that doesn't kind of meet you where you are, meet you with the data you're working with, you can even go to other, and you'll discover I can connect to live websites and pull data directly into my report right from the internet. Or I can use Active Directory. Or I could connect to Hadoop or to Spark or to these other big data platforms and data lakes, and even leverage that data within my reporting experience. Even things like ODBC and some of the more traditional OLE DB connectors as well, all within the context of one tool. Now, I've just obviously done a very quick survey here just to give you some perspective on how diverse Power BI is. And then I'm going to go back to the humble folder. So I'm going to click on the File category, and I will connect to a folder of files. And this is beautiful. When I choose folder, I'm going to click Connect. All I have to do is say where the folders of files are stored. So I'm going to click Browse, and I'm going to choose on my desktop that monthly folder with the monthly exports that are CSVs. Then I'll click OK. Once I do, Power BI is going to look at that folder. It's going to analyze the files, and it's going to give me a preview. Now, right now, you'll see that it shows me all 22 of these files, all these files in this folder. Now, what I'm going to do is combine the data together. Now, because these files have a consistent structure, it's going to be easy peasy. I simply click Combine and Load, and now 22 files are going to be accessed by Power BI, process, it's going to give me a suggestion here. All right, how do I want to break up the data? And you'll notice that because this is a CSV file, those who don't know what that looks like, I want to bring some clarity here real quick. A CSV file is a common way of extracting data from different systems and platforms, and it separates columns and rows of data by commas. We have a bunch of different commas here, and Power BI automatically detected that the comma is what separated these items up. So it just did it for me. And now I have nice, clean, configured data, columns and rows, and I just click OK. Once I click OK, it is now going to take that example, and it's going to map that onto every one of those other files. It's going to run through the process, and notice within seconds, assuming everything works, we'll just let it run here. Big drum roll. Lo and behold, our data just loaded on the right-hand side of the screen. Now, I'm currently looking at the end result. This is the visualization view. But if you want to see what actually happened, right, you're probably sitting there saying, that's nice, you're telling me, but show me the data. I had a student recently in class, kept saying, show me the data, show me the data, let me see behind the scenes. You go to the data on the left, and we see all of this data is available to us here, and it's all been stacked in one file. So I have one table, and in that table, I have data from April 2016 and April 2017, August 2016, August 2017, and so on, all stored within just seconds of clicking. Now, I want to actually make this into a functional report experience. So I've connected the data. That was already cutting out the first two steps of that reporting process. And the great part is I never have to do this again. It is now a permanent connection. And in the future, when I change the data, as I'll do at the end of this demo, I can refresh and instantly new files come in. Now, in this case, I've connected. I'm going to make a basic visualization. Now, those who have worked with pivot tables in Excel, this will be very familiar to you. You see, if I go to my list of fields on the right, my columns, field language here from like a database perspective, I am going to check date. So I want to create a simple line chart, trends over time. I check date. Now, if this were a pivot table in Excel, when I check date, what would I get? Table elements, rows of data, columns of data. In Power BI, it automatically visualizes it. Now, for the moment, it's blank because I just checked the date, so I only have dates. But watch what happens when I then check, like in this case, sale total. Power BI intelligently places the data into the corresponding area and creates a lovely visualization for me right out of the box. So the moment I check and check, instantly I'm already doing my visualization steps. And this, of course, is really exciting because I don't have to then agonize over which visual should I start with. Power BI already helps me begin that process. And I'll actually show you with some other examples. It will do this intelligently based on the type of data it understands we're working with. Now, so far, I have a very basic, simple little column chart. I'm going to zoom in on this. You'll see there is this little focus mode icon that is the Power BI report creator's best friend. I click focus mode, and what this does is it zooms in on this one visual. So rather than seeing the entire report, I'm focusing on one screen. You probably have done this in Excel with a whole separate page. It's really easy in the context of Power BI. You just click on the little square with an arrow, zooms you right in. Now, I'm looking at sale total by year currently, and I want to look at this from the perspective of trends over time. So rather than having columns for individual years, I'm going to change my visualization. Now, to do this is very easy. You'll see at the top of the screen, we have visualizations here. These visualizations, of course, will be very familiar. Some of us might recognize these images just as we look at them. We know what these icons mean. Now, if you don't, you can always hover, and Power BI gives you a description. So I see I have the line chart currently selected. I'm going to click line. When I click line, watch what happens. Power BI instantly reconfigures my view, repositions these elements, and displays them in a new way. Now I can see that I have, in this case, 2 years worth of data from 2016 to 2017, and it looks like there's an overall downward trend in terms of our actual sales values. Now, in this case, I want to actually show this in a way that makes a little bit more sense. I want to configure this in a slightly more visually interesting way, because currently we are working at the level of the year. That's nice, but if I only have 2 years worth of data, from a data visualization perspective, whoop-de-doo, right? I have a line. Not really all that helpful. I want more substance. I want more granularity to my insights. Now, Power BI automatically works with dates, just like pivot tables in Excel, with what is called a hierarchy. So you'll notice that it currently has year as the top. That's the head honcho, the biggest or broadest category. Then we have quarter, then month, and then lastly, the day. Now in this case, I am going to push down so that I can see, I want to look at my quarters. I will click expand all down one level, and you'll see these little expand arrows. They just kind of help you go downstairs. I describe it as kind of going from the penthouse suite to the floor below it. So I click expand all, and it now expands and opens up. Now my line chart shows trends over time, but by month or by year and by quarter. And I could click it again, and now I have a line chart that shows me by month and by quarter and by year. And it gives me this nice insight into the trends over time. Now, maybe you're familiar with a line chart. Now, if you're like I am, and I look at this line chart, it's okay, but as I'm looking at it, it kind of feels thin, right? From a visualization perspective, it's always good to kind of give visuals that have substance. And I have nothing against the line chart, but often they are quite thin. They don't really feel as substantial as I like them to. So a close complement to the line chart is the area chart. I bet some of you have worked at this before. If you have not, you can click on the area chart, and you'll see that this area chart, which I click on here, I call it the mountain range visual. The area chart now has these ups and downs, dips, but it's shaded in. So we now have this lovely color that helps us kind of quickly identify and understand what we're looking at. Now, so far, we have one simple visual. Just taking me a couple of minutes to create this. A few clicks, a few changes. Now I'm going to go back to my report. That looks pretty good. I'll click back to report. Then, after I return to my canvas, I'll position this on the screen. So I'm going to drag this now down to the bottom right corner. I'm going to resize this a bit because I want to show you something else awesome that Power BI does. It helps you build your canvas. It helps you build this report. So I've shown you thus far, of course, how in the context of Power BI, we can quickly and easily, of course, just drop in values and how Power BI kind of fills things in for us. There's something else that we can do in the context of a Power BI environment. And this is where we get into the whole crux of the issue that I pointed at in the middle of our reporting process. You see, I mentioned, if we refer back to that slide deck real quick, I'll bring this up here. I pointed out that, of course, right there at the center, we have this problem of trying to identify what is the correct visual for us to use in the context of our Power BI experience. It can be hard for us to make those decisions. What we can do in the context of Power BI as we are working with our reporting experience is actually double-click on a canvas and activate a feature called Q&A. So when I double-click on my canvas here, double-click, I now have a Q&A pop-up that will allow me to quickly and easily engage with my content in Power BI by simply typing a question and getting an answer about my data. So in this case, I've double-clicked, and you should see now I have a Q&A box. Now in this Q&A box, I have the option to type what my question is. Now, again, I said that one of the problems from a visualization perspective is making decisions about what visual to use. So I'm going to type, show me, and instantly the magic begins. Show me, and I'm going to see our sales total. So I maybe don't know what the best way is to do this. I bet some of you in this webinar, you haven't made a lot of charts and graphs before. That's a common thing I encounter as a trainer. In this context, when I do show me, I can then say, show me sale total, and instantly it gives me an answer. Instantly, it sums my values and gives me this result. So I already have an answer, sale total, total value. But I want to go a step further. All right, that's good. I'll come back to that. But for now, show me sale total. But I want to see this broken out in geolocation data. I bet some of you work with the data related to cities and states. Perhaps have some international folks. I've taught people in the UK, people, we did a class for Coca-Cola, worked with people in Ireland, Manila. So you might have international data that you're engaging with. Easy to fix. I can say, show me total sale by country. Now, right now, the data in this file is not configured in such a way that Power BI automatically knows what we're looking at here in this context is, of course, actually countries that are on maps. Right now, it sees words. Sometimes it gets it right, not always. So I'm going to help it a little bit. So I know that this is a good visual. I could do a bar chart, but a map makes way more sense for geolocation data. I can type as, and I just say a map. Now in seconds, I have created a visual that maps data and shows by the size of the bubble on this bubble map, what are the total sales for the United States compared to total sales for Canada. Now this is nice, but you'll see that if we only have 2 data points, if I'm only selling here in the United States and in Canada, that's a nice visual, but probably not as substantial as I would like. So I want to go a step further. I want to go deeper. I'm going to say by country, and I'm going to edit this question. I'm going to change it. This awesome Q&A visual. I'm going to say, show me sale total by country and by state. It helps if I type correctly. Let me type and. There we go. And state. Then I get this, and then I'm sad. I look at this and go, okay, I said map. I'm not getting a map. I said looking at these states, and all I'm getting is these really, really tiny little bars because we have a lot of states in the US, right? All right, something's wrong. Well, the problem here is Power BI is really, really smart, but in this case, its intelligence is running up against a brick wall. We have data that we haven't yet officially categorized. We haven't told Power BI that states and countries are geolocation data. Well, that's not a problem. It's an easy fix. So I have country and state. And if this were a class, we'd spend a lot of time talking about how you do this categorizing and how you always should do this as a good Power BI best practice. So the moment that I connected to my data, if I weren't obviously in a session talking about the tool, I would have first clicked on country on the right. Then I would choose from the column tools tab to categorize my data as a country. Then I would choose my city. You probably guess what happens next. I will say this is a city of data. And then I would even find things like my state or my postal code, as the case may be. In this case, I have state, and I will mark state as a state or province. And obviously, this is, of course, applicable to US as well as Canadian provinces and locations as well. Now notice what happened. I did the work. And in Excel, normally I would then have to do an extra step. I have to update whatever I'm working with. In Power BI, instantaneous changes. Now, because I've explained to the tool what this data is, instantly my Q&A visual has updated to, lo and behold, reflect this lovely, lovely bubble map. Now, this is a Q&A visual, and this is a special visual to Power BI. It's actually one of their more recent things that they've introduced. Now, in this case, this is a question that I've created, and I want to keep this. I want to keep this forever. I don't want to just leave this temporarily. I want to save it. So I'm going to convert this question into an answer, into a solution. You'll see Microsoft has made it very easy to do this. I simply click on these little squares that I'm marking here, and those squares will plug this in the context of our environment. So I click on that, and that locks that in as a permanent visual. I actually literally just yesterday discovered something that I did not know before, so I'm going to share it now in this webinar because it's just so cool, I can't help myself. I would then tell my students, if you did this, there was no way to go back because I didn't know for a while that this is possible. I accidentally found this out. If you click on that Q&A visual, you'll notice it here, special visual in Power BI, a little comment bubble. If you click this, it's really cool. It will translate what you have in the visual back into a question, and I can edit it. So if I didn't want to see the country, only the level of state, or instead of country, I want to see state and city, I could edit this here and get the same desired results. So it's this beautiful back and forth, and it's like Microsoft has thought of everything or something. It's really cool. So in this case, I'm going to convert it again. I don't want to go back to the question. I'm done. I'm good. So I convert it. Now I have this lovely map. Now, after I do some basic changes, I have a map visual, I have an area chart here. Maybe then I realize, now that I've got a few visuals, I want to start analyzing this not just by total sales, but also by product. Now, in this scenario, my file has nothing that really gives me context for my products. If I go back to the data, I'm going to go to this thing called the data view I showed earlier, the Excel grid perspective. I look at my data view, I can see I have a lot of columns, but the only thing that tells me something about my product is item ID. I have no context, no information for my data. Everybody here who has worked with a relational database, of course, knows why this is, right? It's a link, a reference to information. I have to pull in another file to accomplish this. Now, here's how easy this is. I am going to go to Get Data, like we did earlier, and I'm going to choose Get Data. And I'm going to choose Excel. So Get Data, and then choose Excel. Now this time, I'm going to connect to that same folder, but grab an Excel workbook. So I'm going to find my desktop, go to the folder, and this time I'm going to grab my Lux Footwear sales file, a fake shoe company I've invented for purposes of this in class I teach. I'm going to click open. I'm going to connect to an Excel workbook. Now we have two sets of data I'm linking to, a CSV with a bunch of, or a folder with a bunch of CSVs, and an Excel workbook that has a bunch of tables and sheets. Now in this case, I am going to just load the items table. So I'm going to check items. That's our products. I could grab them all, but I'm just going to grab items for the moment. Then I'm going to click load. Now because I am interacting with an Excel table, it's already structured. So it just reaches in, pulls the data, and now I have two tables within my model. One called monthly, one called items. Now, something really incredible has happened as part of this process, and anybody who's used Access or Power Pivot or even a SQL database will be familiar with this. You see, when I did that connection now, behind the scenes, Power BI has automatically detected there are connections between my data. So much so that without me doing anything, anybody from an Excel perspective will know this, without me doing anything, I can pull from one table and another table, and because there are two things that connect them together, the item ID, watch what happens. I know I have probably some Excel people here, so I really like to just drive home how incredible this is. I am going to double click in the top right corner of the screen here, top right of my canvas, make another visual. This time I'm going to say, all right, I want to see my total sales broken out by the type of item, the category. So I'm going to say, show me sale total by type. Now that type field, if I type it correctly, is from a separate table. But Power BI has automatically detected connections, and instantly, no VLOOKUPs required, I now am pulling in exactly what corresponds to my sales. And I can then say, as a donut, I'm feeling, I like donuts. The donut shop actually here near us in Georgia, they make maple bacon donuts, maple with bacon bits on top. Love those. I like donuts. I'll use one for my report. Show me sale total by type as donut. I'm going to pin this just like I did. I'm going to make this a permanent visual. So I type a question, pin, lock into the report. Lovely. Now I have three visuals. What's also incredible is these visuals are all automatically interactive. Now in Excel, this is possible. I have to create a slicer and do some changes to some settings, make a timeline, and I can do some changes to the settings, but it takes time to do that. Power BI, it's as simple as using the data on the same page. And now I can click on any piece of this report experience, and it impacts everything else on the screen. So if I click on Florida, it will instantly impact the data and show me out of the entire sales total broken out by type, here's what portion of each of these wedges Florida represents of our numbers. And it shows me my area chart filtered to just Florida. And I click on Georgia because I'm a Georgian, I'll stick with Georgia here. Or we have Minnesota, or we have somewhere in Canada. And you can see it's a fully interactive report in minutes, not hours, not days of analysis. Now, behind the scenes, this is what governs this. This is why these two tables talk. Behind the scenes, there is what is called a data model. And anybody who's used Access or some of these other tools I've referenced, this will be very familiar. I'm going to go to this third icon here. This is the model view. When I click on this, you'll notice that Power BI automatically detected that there was an item ID here, and that talks with the item ID there. Normally, Excel, I'd have to write a VLOOKUP. SQL, I'd have to write some sort of a where clause that evaluates between two different tables or do some kind of a join if the relationships weren't already established. In Power BI, it's as simple as loading it, and Power BI did the rest. Now, if this were a class, we'd talk more about what if it doesn't? How do I do this? But you see how much time it saves. You don't have to be a Power BI pro to accomplish this. Now, I've shown quite a variety of the different ways in which we can enhance this report. We've added in some different elements, we've created some different visuals, and we've also seen how these talk one to the other. Now, I'm going to show one other piece of this reporting experience because we've created three visuals. I want to show you one other piece that goes into this process. Maybe as I'm working in the context of this report, I notice that there is suddenly a really big dip in January 2017. I noticed this in the line chart, and I want to understand what's happening with that dip. Normally, because we are, after all, talking about data visualization, I would have to spend some time looking at that and doing some analysis. I'd probably have to throw up a new page. I'd have to create a page that shows me that particular period of time and all the numbers behind the scenes, and I'd probably spend a few minutes writing some calculations, perhaps, to come up with an answer. In Power BI, all I have to do is go to the item, to the period, right-click on it, and not only do I have the capacity to go to that item, I can even say Analyze and have Power BI explain what happened. Now, I've shown you one of the awesome features, Q&A. We type questions, get an answer. This is what is called Quick Insights, and this Quick Insights feature is obviously amazing. It can even build the reports for me, but better yet, it analyzes trends and tries to explain them. Microsoft is actively leveraging artificial intelligence, machine learning, and really powerful algorithms to help us do less work and spend more time understanding our data. So you'll notice when I do that analysis, it tells me there was a 41.68% decrease in sales total between the end of the year in 2016 and the start of the year in 2017. It also shows me one of the reasons for this. It says December accounted for the majority of the decrease among data in a file, offering or offsetting the increase of January 2017. Now, some insights maybe don't make total sense, right? Okay, that's meh. I'll scroll through. Okay, now that's interesting. We see that each of these specific cities had a huge decrease compared to the increase in Minnesota and Palm Beach. So we see that some cities went down, some went up, and we're wanting to understand why. Now, this is a waterfall chart, but I can change it to a lot of different chart types. I could choose a scatter chart. And now it shows the same data with all kinds of really powerful analytics features baked into this visual. And again, it's done for me automatically. I can click on a stacked column chart and it shows me now a breakdown. No, I don't want that, right? That doesn't work. But you see how it gives you the capacity to explore different options, different perspectives, and in seconds, not hours, not even minutes, create new visuals. Now, in this case, as I'm looking, I probably will decide I want to just look at the type of item. That's the biggest thing that I'm focusing on. Looks like winter boot and dress shoes accounted for the biggest decrease. So as it got warmer, perhaps it was going down. Not as many people needed winter boots. All right, I want to look at that. So I have this. I'll make it a scatter chart. And if I want to add it to my report, it's as simple as clicking plus. I could also rate this and say that was good or not, and that will help Microsoft make better report suggestions for me in the future. So I'll click plus, I'm adding the quick insight onto the page. Then I'm going to reconfigure my screen just a little bit so that I have some space to present these different elements. And as I reconfigure, you'll see that obviously it's just giving us a nice, lovely visual that helps me then see all of these different elements, and it is, again, fully and completely interactive across the report. This is the power of Microsoft Power BI. We can accomplish all these steps, accomplish all of our goals, create brand new visuals, and have Power BI lead us down the path of what's best. And to round this demonstration out, and then I will, of course, move on to some time for questions, what I'm going to do is now update the data. So currently, I have in that folder, as I showed you, a whole bunch of different files, 22 files. What if we have the end of a particular year, Q4 2017, and there are a whole bunch of new items in that file? Watch the process now. I drop it into the monthly folder. When new data comes in Power BI, I then simply click refresh. And as soon as I click refresh, it's reaching into that folder, pulling in new data, and now automatically my visual updated to reflect new information, new data that's come in, and now I can see that we had previously the end of this line chart with a spike in September. Now we're moving into October, November, December, and it's kind of now flattening out a little bit in terms of a line. That is the power of the Power BI process. Now, obviously, there's way more to what it can do. I could publish it and share it with people live and do some other really amazing things as part of this process. But hopefully, this gives you some perspective on just what Power BI has to offer, and hopefully gives you some ideas on how amazing it can be with your data. Now, with that, I'm going to, of course, switch over now to an opportunity for us to have some time to kind of discuss some things. And of course, Mayanne, I will pass this off to you here as it relates to this.
Thank you so much. I learned a lot about Power BI that I didn't think I'd know, but thank you for that. Just wanted to have everyone give them a quick reminder. You know, we did say this was part one. Eric has part two coming up next month, so please join us if you have the opportunity or the time to for that as well next month. If you're interested in the material that Eric's been talking about or that on this webinar, if you just have questions regarding what's available to you, please log on to newhorizons.com and do a quick zip code search to find the centers that's nearest you. As I mentioned, our webinar schedule is also up to date. So click on the webinars link to view the full schedule and register for any upcoming sessions here. We do have quite a few questions that did come in. So I'll try to, I'm trying to be cognizant of time here. But one of the first questions that people had was, what are the advantages and disadvantages of Power BI versus Tableau?
Great question. Advantage number one, I would say personally, it is built on top of the Microsoft experience, which means that if you either as a user are trying to migrate from Excel and some other tools from that platform into Power BI, it's easier, more accessible. I know personally, I am moving toward training as a Tableau trainer with New Horizons as well, and I know it's taken some adjustment for me. It's a different experience. A bigger benefit that I would say, and this is obviously I know it can be a little different, is Microsoft's platform's license structure. You see, everything that I showed you, literally every single thing that I did, is available to you for free. You do not need a license to download Power BI Desktop. You do not need a license to connect to data. You do not need a license to use Q&A or work with your information. It is all completely and totally free. And if that sounds too good to be true, I promise you it's not. That's kind of one of the things that it's mind-blowing to me about the Power BI experience. What is also beneficial is in relation to the license structure with Tableau, you have to have paid plans. Now I know Tableau pricing probably varies a bit. Last I checked, I think it was something like $70 per person per month to create and do some other things with more advanced tools with the Tableau platform. Power BI, if you want to have a paid account and have live shareable reports that you can embed in Teams or in your SharePoint platform or even in third-party applications, you can do all of this for $10 per person per month. So for one person, $10. For the person who's viewing the report, $10. So for $20 a month, we have fully automatable business intelligence reporting solutions, all on top of a platform that we're familiar with. Those are the two biggest things that I can think of off the top of my head between Tableau and Power BI. And of course, I mean, I know for me, that's one of the reasons I love it. I mean, who could beat a free price tag, right?
Great. And is there a preferred data mining tool like RapidMiner, JMP, SAS that is recommended for Power BI?
Great question. I am not as familiar with those tools myself, I would say personally. From a data mining perspective, obviously there is like Microsoft, I would assume SQL Server Analysis Services would probably play a role to some degree with that. I do know that I did see something recently when Microsoft has been talking about some of the different tools that integrate. And actually one recent thing that Microsoft just did within the last update for the month of July is they released the capability to basically have external tools that get embedded or can interact with your Power BI model. So that I know was a big thing. I saw some Power BI gurus were really getting excited about that, and I would imagine probably what that would extend then is functionality that would let you use maybe some of those data mining tools you potentially engage with outside of the context of Power BI and potentially have those interact with that Power BI model. So obviously, I mean, it kind of can depend on what tool you use, but I also know there is some extensibility within Power BI for things like interacting with R script. So if you use R as a coding language or an analysis mining language, you could of course bring that to bear in your reports and even some custom visualizations as well.
Great. Another question that came in is, I know you had talked about it earlier, indicating that Excel Access have connections to data. The question is, what about SQL databases? Is there a connection there or connector there?
Yes, there is, and it's a really beautiful connection. You actually have two choices when it comes to SQL or to Azure or really any database platform. The first method is import. So I could actually connect, and then it's only when I want to refresh the data that I click refresh like I did in my demo, and it fetches the data and pulls it in. You have a second connection method though that is called direct query, and that hopefully the name kind of gets you excited, because direct query is literally a live connection, and it will be constantly feeding data from your databases, giving you live inputs from those different tools, Azure, local, on-prem, source, and as long as you connect to the data is up to date within your report. And you can then do other configurations where it automatically refreshes every so often, every few minutes, to fetch data from the SQL connection as well. So yes, absolutely connections. You can even leverage SQL queries in Power BI and send those to the data source, or you can use Power BI's interface to craft the query and fetch the data. And actually, Power BI, the Part 2 webinar, I will be talking about some of those concepts, not with a SQL connection, but it all applies to the same tools.
Great. A couple more questions here as we head to the top of the hour. Is Q&A only available through the Power BI service and not on-prem using Power BI report server? I'm sorry.
Great question. Microsoft is actively working, my understanding, to extend some of that capability. I don't know what the status is as of yet on it in relation to the reports server. I know that they have tried to match a lot of those capabilities. I do know that they did just release within the last few months the live direct query that I was just talking about related to a SQL database connection. They did just release the ability for Q&A to operate on top of those links. So then I would assume, more than likely, unless there's some configuration specific, more technical stuff that I'm not aware of on the back end with your Power BI report server config, that scenario would of course allow then that same kind of functionality to play out even in on-prem data.
Perfect. Super cool, simple question here. This person has a Mac. Can they download Power BI for a Mac?
One of my fellow Mac users. Yes, I am a Mac guy, and it's fun being a Mac user in the Windows world, right? When it comes to the Mac, there is no Power BI desktop. Now, with that being said, you have two options. Option number one, this is actually what I did because I do consulting work outside of the scope of New Horizons. I just finished a job for a client with Power BI reporting. In that job, I had to use Power BI on my desktop because I don't have a Windows machine that's not New Horizons property. So what I did is I downloaded or purchased Parallels, a tool on the Mac that let you install side-by-side configuration of Windows with your Mac. That's what I did, and I found that worked out quite well. An alternative method is you could actually use the Power BI service. So if you go to powerbi.com and sign in with a free account, no payment required, you could actually use the free account, and as long as your data is ready to go, you literally would have the exact same reporting experience that I showed you in the demo online. Now, the only difference is, and we'll talk about this in the next webinar, in the desktop, that's where I can go behind the scenes and really fix my data. The Power BI service online app, that allows you to interact with the data, but unfortunately, it doesn't let you really get under the hood, if you will. So if the data is perfect, nice columns and rows, you're good to go as a Mac user. If you need to go deeper, you would then need something like Parallels or some other tool that let you engage with Power BI in a Microsoft context or a Windows context. Great question.
Great, and last question just to round out, since we're hitting the top of the hour. Is it possible to have more than 2 resources within Power BI? Let's say you want to link an Excel, Access, and PowerPoint file for a combined report. Is that possible?
Oh, absolutely. Yes, you can connect to tons and tons of data sources. I don't even know of a limit. I mean, I'm sure eventually at some point your file would kind of probably get to the point where it's kind of bogged down and kind of crying because you have so much data you're pulling in, but it is a very performant tool. It is designed to be really powerful, have a lot of different connections, and maintain those connections live in as efficient a way as possible. And actually, I'll bring up a quick example of this just to kind of give you some perspective on all the connections a person could link to. So if I bring over my Power BI report here, which I'll do, or not, as the case may be. It seems my computer is having a little bit of a hard time playing nice today. There we go. If I step inside of that, you'll see that there are a ton of, in this case, SharePoint lists that I'm linked to, tons and tons and tons. And I'm pulling all of those in real time, self-refreshing, and this is a report that uses a lot of the power of Power BI in the context of my New Horizons network. So yeah, you can have tons of connections.
Great. I know we are at the top of the hour. We really appreciate you, Eric, speaking on behalf of New Horizons and presenting. Everyone, thank you again for joining us. Please register for the next session for Power BI Part 2 with Eric as well. With that said, everyone, please be safe, stay healthy, and thank you. You may now log off from the webinar. Thank you again.
Very welcome, and have a wonderful day, folks.